Yeah, so right as the very first verdict was the one for Travis McMichael, that guilty verdict for malice murder, there was someone in the courtroom who actually had an outburst. It was audible enough to where you could actually hear it. And at the time, Greg McMichael's wife, Travis McMichael's mom, Lee, she was actually holding her hands pretty tightly. Marcus Arbery stood up and started. Marcus Arbery, who is Ahmaud Arbery's father, he stood up and he cheered and he said it was a long time coming. And one of the family's attorneys, Ben Crump, tried to calm him down, but the judge stopped the proceedings at that point. And if you were watching this live, you probably heard the judge ask the person who had the outburst to leave, and that was Marcus Arbery. So security did tell he had to leave at that point in time after he stood up and yelled. And Arbery's mom, Wanda Cooper Jones, as soon as that first guilty verdict came through, she just started crying uncontrollably. She's cried at several points throughout this entire trial. She cried, whenever she saw all of those videos that she had tried to avoid seeing this entire time. And of course, sitting in that courtroom, she had to watch all of those videos, including very obviously graphic videos showing her son's body. So many times that she broke out in tears of sadness, and it looked at that point in time, whenever she was crying, that she was crying with a little bit of satisfaction there as that first guilty verdict was read out at that point in time. So his father had to exit the courtroom for making an outburst, and then Jones just crying. She was rocking back and forth. She was shaking the hands of Reverend Al Sharpton and Lee Merritt, who were both here with her. They were, really tightly grasping her hands. Travis McMichael's mom and Greg McMichael's wife, she kind of remained kind of silent throughout the whole time, kind of looking straight ahead as they read all of those verdicts out, kind of a little bit motionless. She was looking at her husband, Greg, and he did turn to look at her at one point in time. They didn't say anything to each other or mouth any words or anything like that, as far as whenever they did look at each other. When the verdicts continued to be read, as it got through Travis McMichael, as it got through Greg McMichael, you could just kind of see the supporters of the McMichaels and the Bryans. They were wiping tears from their eyes. They were trying to comfort each other at that point in time. And again, even inside the courtroom, I told you how loud these supporters were outside. You can still hear all those supporters inside the courtroom as they were cheering when all of the verdicts were read out today.
An emotional day, Hope, that's for sure. Any word from the judge as to when the sentencing will happen?
He did talk at the end once he excused the jury. He told all of the attorneys in the room that they were going to work together to see what they can do as far as scheduling. He did say it could be a couple of weeks before they're able to get that sentencing hearing scheduled and then get them back in there, everyone back in there for that. Of course, tomorrow being Thanksgiving, may not know a better timeline until maybe later on this afternoon, but probably Friday will be the better idea of when we will know for sure what they're looking like as far as having that sentencing hearing.
Hope, it took this jury roughly 11 hours to come to this verdict. Can you tell us what you observed from the jury? It seemed like there were a lot of note takers in the group.
There were a lot of people who were taking notes. I was not physically in the courthouse. We were kind of relying on some of our pool reporters who were in the courthouse, kind of relaying a lot of details to us. But they were taking notes. Really, whenever things got complicated, I mean, you have three defendants here, and then of course you have the state presenting their arguments. So they were really taking a lot of notes whenever things kind of started to get a little bit convoluted, or not so much around things that they could actually see as far as videos or anything like that. But when it came to a lot of those explanations that both sides were trying to give, that's when a lot of those notes came out. During the closing arguments, a lot of notes taking then as well. And then as the judge read off the list of charges and the instructions yesterday, there's a lot of furious note taking there as well, because they had a huge task ahead of them. And then, of course, when you got down to Roddie Bryan, there was a possibility that he they would not consider that one of those aggravated assault charges, and that they would consider 3 lesser charges. So there was a lot going on yesterday that they were trying to kind of write down and kind of wrap their minds around, having to go back and sort through weeks of evidence and 27 charges. So they were sharp in there as they listened and then went back to work on their conclusion.
more and more difficult to hear you out there, Hope, but we appreciate you giving your insight as to what happened this morning when the jury found all three men guilty of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. That verdict being handed down around 1:36 this afternoon.